Welcome back to hour number 3 of the Gary Sutton Show here on a Monday morning. A lot of people still looking at the border and what's going on there. And we just read a story right now where they are seeing, and this is just an initial report, by the way. It's a Fox News exclusive this morning by Jana Winter, that several dead children have been discovered washed up along the riverbank of the Rio Grande, but fails to note that there have been no reports by the Obama administration on this so far. And they're saying that there's a pattern of covering up dead illegal alien kids by the Obama administration. It was 2 weeks before news was reported on the sole child death acknowledged by the Obama administration, which is Gilberto Ramos, a 15-year-old boy from Guatemala whose body was found in the Texas brush, dead from the heat. We're going to keep our eye on that story as well. And, again, these kids are coming north, and it is a perilous journey they're taking. We have our next guest who knows a little something about people. They come right across his property. Fred and his wife, Peggy Davis, are fourth-generation cattle and horse ranchers near Tombstone, Arizona. And they are in what is known as the hot zone of Cochise County. They're right there on the border. They've made themselves available from time to time. We've talked to him. I got to be friends with him over the years. And with us this morning, live from his ranch in Arizona, is Fred Davis. Fred, good morning to you, and welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show.
Thank you, Gary. It's good to be here.
Fred, I know you've had a busy day. You were on Fox News this morning early, and that was, about a 3-hour drive up to Tucson, and then you drove back on home, and now it's still only about, 8 o'clock right now where you're at?
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock.
Fred, you're a guy who's been on the front line of this for a long time. We have a lot of people over the last 3 weeks that act like this just started to happen, this flood of illegal aliens into the country, and specifically now the children. And I think that's what's really put a different face on this whole thing. What's your reaction to what you've seen over the last 3 weeks?
It's a Trojan horse, Gary. They're using these kids to divert the Border Patrol to fill their hands, to make them take care of them to where they can run whatever else they want at will. The cartels are having a heyday. They can do anything they want right now. The Border Patrol's their hands are completely full.
You sit right on the property there that borders basically into Mexico, or all but. Tell people about what you're experiencing as a rancher. You're a guy that's been there, your family's been there 4 generations. Certainly you're trying to keep your property and do the right things, but tell people what the kinds of things you're experiencing and what you're seeing as evidence of people coming across there right now.
Well, they're not as thick on my ranch as they are John Ladd's. He has 10.5 miles of fence with Mexico, and it is just terrible.
What kind of things are happening there?
Well, John has 9 pastures in his ranch, and the Border Patrol and the illegals have effectively made it 1 pasture, because as soon as he puts up a fence, one or the other of them tears it down. They drive through his gates. There's been trucks coming out of Mexico with drugs. He's had 47 trucks across his ranch in the last 2.5 years, and they didn't catch one, but they found one that broke down on the journey.
Wow.
And that was right underneath one of the 85-foot tall cameras that can read a license plate at 3 miles, and this truck broke down right underneath the camera, and surprisingly enough, the camera had been broken for a week also.
Where is the Border Patrol? I mean, I've heard different stories, and I have a good friend, Michael Cutler, who says there's not near enough Border Patrol in this country to do the policing of this region in the way it needs to be done. Plus, we're now seeing today stories out of Breitbart where 70% of the people in Border Patrol are now going through paperwork and babysitting and the whole thing.
Exactly. Plus, the Border Patrol has their in-depth strategy. We just met with the Deputy Commissioner of CBP on Friday, and I asked him very pointedly, who in Washington can make the decision to move the Border Patrol, the biggest numbers of them, to the border? And I did not get a direct answer to that question. I said, we have begged for 20 years. We have begged our sector chief. I said, for 2 years, I've begged the Joint Chief here in Arizona, put them on the border, and they give us all this song and dance of why they can't do it. Yet when the Minutemen came in '05, that was a bunch of retired guys that took their lawn chairs to the border and their cell phones. They did more to seal up the border than the Border Patrol's ever done.
Fred, you talked about John Ladd's ranch. Now, is John's ranch right next to yours or just down the road?
No, my house is actually 25 miles from the border.
Okay. So, the types of things that you're getting to see, and again, you've been to Washington. You were there in April. I know you and I talked in April when you were there with the Hold the Feet to the Fire rally. And you've been there many times. Your voice has been out there. Today it was on national TV again. And you've been a voice who's been calling out and trying to make a difference. And yet, what kind of federal response have you been met with? I suspect when you were in Washington, you probably went to your congressman and other people. What have they said to you?
Oh, the Congress people make promises. We've had John McCain lie right to our face about what he has done and would do on the border. And for our Second Amendment rights, I supported Senator McCain years ago, and I am done with that. The politicians come and pretend to be real interested and do nothing when they get back to Washington. Since they've had the Joint Chief in Arizona, he is over the two sectors in Arizona. It helps. We at least have someone we can sit down face to face with, but their strings are being pulled in Washington, Gary, and they can't make the decisions we want them to. The Joint Chief finally admitted the other day that Dr. Fleischer and I were correct. They needed more men on the border itself.
We also know that in this country, and I know this probably for you right now, this is not the number one thing, but we have a lot of people who overstay their visas. And so when I was talking with Michael Cutler the other day, he said, well, we need people at the border, but we also need people in there to take care of enforcing people who overstay visas. He said it's like playing a baseball game, and you say, but I'm not going to have any outfield. Do you think I'd win the game? But also you're saying, well, if we don't have the infield, we're not going to win the game either, right?
Right. Right. The Border Patrol likes to use the strategy that this is our backfield. We have an in-depth strategy. And I said, yes, but you have nobody on the line. And you see, Gary, the problem with their strategy as far as sealing the border is they have no metrics. If they put their agents on the border, I don't want to see them catching any people or any loads of dope. I want them to turn them back. Mm-hmm. But people will go, well, look, they didn't catch anybody. They didn't make any confiscations of drugs. The border must be safe.
And of course, the president even said last week, as late as last week, that the border is as safe as it's ever been. I mean, I don't know how we could sit and watch what we're seeing daily and say the border is as safe as it's ever been when we don't even know who's coming through.
There was a Mexican helicopter that fired at Border Patrol agents.
Saw that.
Fired warning shots last week. They are flying over Mexico. I mean, they're flying out of Mexico into Texas and blowing dust on agents and media that are down there on the Rio Grande trying to film stuff, making it impossible to film. And our country ignores the incursion out of Mexico. This is just totally unacceptable, Gary.
We're chatting with Fred Davis, Arizona border rancher, and telling his story about what's going on down there. He was on Fox News earlier this morning, Fox and Friends. Fred, you and your wife, Peggy, live there, and I'm always amazed every year I speak with you, and whenever I get a chance to speak with you now, I often say, why do you want to stay? Why do you want to stay and fight this nonsense over and over again? And you've always given me a really good answer. Tell me what your response is.
Well, one of my great-grandfathers came to Cochise County in 1867, the other in 1880. I'm the fourth generation ranching here in Cochise County, and I'm not going to let them win. I've got my back up, and they're not kicking me out. The other thing is our property values have gone to nothing.
Yeah.
Ranches are, who would want to move into an area where you're going to deal with the kind of stuff John has going on?
Yeah. Yeah, the reality of that is incredible. you can feel free to call into 1-800-357-0910 if you've got a question for Fred Davis here. Fred, you were talking about John Ladd's ranch. And I was listening this morning, and some of the things that they're finding there are not just things that you're going to find from kids crossing the border or anybody else. There's a lot of other things out there that will cause us a little bit of distress. Tell us about those.
Well, close to me, on my neighbor found a Koran in a backpack that was just a few feet from my fence. We know he came through my ranch first. Another friend a little closer to the border found a prayer rug on his place. We had another rancher friend that had 13 East Indians stop her and ask her to get the Border Patrol. They wanted to turn themselves in for political asylum. Another rancher had 10 Chinese show up in his yard and demand a ride to Phoenix, 250 miles away. What people don't understand, it's not Lupita the maid and Jose the gardener coming across that border and a bunch of little harmless kids. You know, the diseases coming with those kids is amazing. They're telling the Border Patrolman to come to work, bring an extra set of clothes, wear gloves to work, and bring shoes also. When you leave work, shower, take those clothes and leave them at work and put your fresh ones on to go home. They've got foot and mouth disease, which transmits into cattle as hoof and mouth, which is a terrible thing to try to eradicate. They've got a strain of TB that is drug resistant that's going around. They've got another respiratory disease that isn't horrible in humans, but when horses catch it, it's about 60% fatal. Well, what about all the horse patrols rounding these people up?
Right.
We're going to have diseases in our cattle and horses. Plus, they're putting these kids on the airplanes that you and I ride on with, and they are not allowed to speak. None of the medical professionals can talk about what's going on at these centers. There's been one Border Patrolman who caught bacterial pneumonia that is in the hospital off work. It's amazing this deal is so serious, and they're just blowing it off. We got to be humanitarian.
And I don't think anybody has ever said, let's not be humanitarian. But the point is, here we now see what happens when we give up on any set of rules in this country. And more importantly, what you described is a potential security crisis. And it is the job of our federal government to keep us secure. I want to come back and talk with you more about that. We'll take a quick break, Fred. We'll be right back here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. You know, when John, or Fred rather, a few minutes ago mentioned about, finding prayer rugs and, Korans and so forth, that doesn't necessarily mean that those people were terrorists. But by the same token, obviously it lets you know that it's not just people from Guatemala or people just from Mexico or people just from Bolivia or wherever it might be coming in. There are all kinds of people coming across. And again, because we don't know who they are, there is the possibility that those people are potential terrorists, right? I mean, that's why you get in the country. You're not going to come through the gate and say, hey, by the way, I'm a terrorist. Here I am. You're going to try to come in a way where you're not going to be located. Fred Davis is a fourth-generation cattle and horse rancher near Tombstone, Arizona. He's been with us this morning here on the Gary Sutton Show. Fred, when you look at these people that are coming across, one of the groups we're hearing about more and more and more are these M14 groups, these gangs, and some of the most vicious gangs we've ever heard of coming from the South. Are we seeing any evidence on any of the ranches along your area there where these people are coming into the country?
Yes, there's been some right here in Cochise County, some MS-13 gang members. And that's something that the American public is being kept in the dark about on all these kids. They're finding gang members in these kids, and 80% to 90% of these kids that they're putting in these centers right now are males from 14 to 17, and a lot of them are gang members. You know, they're turning these kids loose to other illegals. Nobody checks IDs, nobody nothing. They're worried about picking them up to keep them out of the sex trade, and they may be delivering them flying them right into it.
Fred, many of us sit back here, and as hard as we try, and as much as we watch, and as much as we hear people like you, we still deal with this like it's some kind of numbers game out there somewhere that really is not going to affect us. What would you tell people who are sitting back taking that attitude? Because you are there on the front lines, living there with that kind of thing going on every day.
They're trashing me to get to you, and they're going to move in next door to you. And if you don't have them now, you will have them soon. They do not want to be Americans. They do not want to assimilate. They do not want to learn English. Now, I'm talking the vast majority. I'm not about to say all.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an ugly bunch of people that are coming now. The maids and gardeners are all here. These people coming today, last year in this sector, the people they detained were over 20% convicted felons.
Wow.
So my thoughts on that subject is a felon surely is a little more adept at evading capture than the average person walking across the line. So I think the felons coming across the line are probably closer to 50%.
Fred,
and those are convicted in the U.S.
Fred, what would you say? You've been trying to say it to a lot of people in D.C. for a while. You've been trying to say it to people like John McCain in Arizona for a while. What would you tell them you need to have done right now? What are the things, step by step, that as a person living through this on the border, having your property overrun, having to come home and check your house before you go in there, those kind of things, what would you want them to do step by step to just start to really tackle this problem in a way that really is going to make some sense?
You know, I don't argue immigration reform. I don't want to even discuss that until the border is sealed. There has been no will in Washington since Eisenhower to seal that border. Big business wants those people here, and that's why they're here, and no one in Washington will issue the order to seal that border up. We have talked with really frustrated senior Border Patrol agents who have 2 or 3 years left to retire that'll talk freely, and they say, we hate our job. We used to have a clear black and white law enforcement issue, and today the politicians are jerking our chain, and we can't do what the law tells us to do.
Well, Fred, keep putting your voice out there. I know you and your wife, Peggy, have been speaking for a while on this. Keep speaking and get more and more of your fellow ranchers to keep speaking, because we got to keep this voice hot on how to get to some kind of reasonable, first of all, sealing of the border, as you said, get back to some set of rules, and then move forward with some of the other problems related to this whole thing.
Exactly, and I'd like to reconfirm what I said this morning, and it's Peggy's quote. The border's on fire, and Washington is sending us gasoline.
Yeah. Fred, take care, my friend. I look forward to talking to you again soon, all right?
Thank you, Gary.
Always a pleasure. Fred Davis, right down there in Cochise County near Tombstone on the Arizona border this morning here on the Gary Sutton Show.